Hello and welcome. Thanks for being here. We want this to be a fun, pleasant, and harassment-free experience for everyone, so please be kind and please be respectful. I'd like to start our event with this land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, past and present, and honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish tribe. We'll provide links in the chat for you to learn how you can support the tribe and to find out what traditional lands you reside on. My name is Lillian Siggy. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the design operations lead at Ladies at UX Seattle. The Seattle chapter started in 2015 and has grown to be one of the largest chapters in North America. Ladies at UX is a global community with the goal of inspiring, empowering, and supporting each other in a safe and casual environment. Whether you're brand new and pursuing a career in UX and product or are already in the industry, we would love to have you join our community. The best way to do that is through our meetup page. This is where we announce all of our events. You can also find us on LinkedIn and Instagram, as well as in our Slack community. And we'll make sure to drop the links to all of those in the chat. Events are a big part of what we do here, and I wanted to show some of the ones that we've done so far this year. We've done a career development workshop, co-hosted a networking event with University of Washington's Human-Centered Design and Engineering program. We've toured the Microsoft Inclusive Tech Lab, and we've hosted a lot of other events related to UX. In addition to our UX-focused events, our 2023 initiative called Industry Voices is an event series aimed toward uplifting the stories of our community members that align with Cultural Heritage Months. Please stay tuned for our June event for LGBTQ+ Pride Month. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to today's speaker, Jessica Olson, to introduce herself and tell us more about how we can optimize our LinkedIn.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for having me. I'm just going to share my screen really quickly. Okay, can everybody see that? Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming. I am really excited to be a part of being able to speak with you all today. I connected with Ladies at UX through the UW-HCDE networking night. So it was really great to meet everyone there, and hopefully there are some people in the crowd that were at that event too. It was a really great one, and I'm really excited to tell you a little bit more about what I do at Brooksource and a little bit more about, the recruiting field and how to be interacting with recruiters, especially in today's workforce, a little bit about what's going on in the market, and then ultimately what you could be doing on LinkedIn to optimize it to make sure that, especially in this market, you're able to be taking advantage of the opportunities that are out there and you're able to be found. So that's the goal of today's chat. I do want it to be really interactive. So if you have any questions, please feel free to pop those in the chat, and we'll pause every couple slides to go over some of those. There were a ton of questions that came through in the Q&A form that Ladies at UX posted on LinkedIn. So if you asked a question in that, I've worked it somewhere within this presentation, and if not, we'll get to it at the very end. So that will be answered for you. But excited to get into it. So quick introductions, like I said, my name is Jessica and you can call me Jess. I'm our program coordinator here in the Seattle market. But my company, just to give a little bit of a background before we jump in here, my company, we do have offices all over the US. We are a national company. While I do sit in the Seattle office, if you're looking or you are in one of these different locations, or even outside of them, let me know and I can get you connected to your most local point of contact. But if you are here on the West Coast, you can always reach out to me and I can help as much as I can. But just to give a brief introduction to who I am, who the company I work for is, I work for the 811 Group, and within 811 Group, we actually have three different brands, and I personally work for Brooksource, but 811 Group started back in 2000, and like I said, we have around 29 markets nationwide. And our family of brands, again, I work for Brooksource, which is more on that IT hiring side. That's where a lot of like the design hiring, research hiring, and everything would be into, product design, whatever it might be. So that's where I'm going to be helping all of you as well. We also have MetaSource, which is our clinical and IT life sciences hiring, so more on the medical side, and then Calculated Hire, which is more that non-IT business hiring. So those are, if you hear any of those names, it's all us. We have a lot of names. It's really confusing, but that is what we do there. And then in Seattle, when I'm working with different clients, I'm working with the Microsofts, T-Mobile, State of Washington, Best Buy, Lululemon, Amazon, Nordstrom, places like that. So those are the types of roles that I would be helping connect candidates to. But that might be a little confusing if you're not familiar with what contracting is. So just wanted to go over one of the types of recruiting that there might be, which I'll go into in a little bit more detail here in a second. But contracting in general, how it works is basically you would be an employee of, let's for example, use my company, Brooksource. You would be an employee of Brooksource for a 6 to 12 month time period. And you would be working for Brooksource, but on the client's projects, like one of the ones that I mentioned before, like a Microsoft. You're working day to day with them, with their managers. And then at least through us, we have a program called Elevate. If you are an associate level candidate, you potentially could go through that. But if not, you still are just working for Brooksource, but on one of our clients' projects. And then most of the time when it comes to a contract that you have through us, we are looking at a full-time conversion, or you're eligible for that full-time conversion. But again, it depends on the role. A lot of people don't know, but or just there are misconceptions that contracting doesn't have benefits. At least at Brooksource, these are the benefits that we do provide. That is something that when you're talking with other staffing companies, make sure you're asking, because not every staffing company would have benefits, but it depends company to company. But that's just a brief rundown of how contracting works. I did want to briefly go over what is Elevate. So I know not everyone here is in the associate level range, but me personally, I do specialize in supporting our candidates that are recent graduates, bootcamp graduates, career changers. They're transitioning out of the military, or they have a large career gap. Anyone like that that's trying to re-enter the workforce, that's what I focus on. So we are working with candidates in those communities, and when you do have an opportunity, or when one of our clients has an opportunity, we are able to connect you with that role and then provide additional professional and technical training to make sure that you have all the skills that you need to be successful in that role. So obviously, if you have any questions about this, we can we can chat afterwards. I just really wanted to briefly mention it, the technical training that we provide. And then just in general, this is a good timeline of like how you would be working with a staffing company, which again, we'll go over the differences here in a little bit. But this is how to specifically work with us, as well as my LinkedIn. And if you wanted to reach out, just wanted to put this here now. So at the very end, we don't have to do that. But basically, the first step with any contracting company is you're contacting the initial recruiter. Then you have a first conversation with them. Typically, there's a second video call with them where they'll go over your resume and everything. And then hopefully they are getting you set up for an interview. So you have a preparation and client interview call with them. Step 5, hopefully you've done the interview, you get a job offer. And then step 6 is when you would start your role. And then in our case with the Elevate program is when you would start the additional training that we provide. But just wanted to really briefly mention all of this, and this is what I do. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me in any of these forms, and we'll talk about why it's really important to connect on LinkedIn here in a little bit. But let's get into the content. Okay, so working with recruiters. So starting out, I know there are a lot of different types of recruiters, so wanted to just go over some of the basics. Um, what recruiters do, obviously, they are screening candidates before and after sending them to a manager, and they're searching to make sure that they're able to give these managers really good talent, and they're doing the initial screening for them typically, and they're also helping candidates access top quality roles that maybe they wouldn't have had an opportunity to look at, depending on the type of recruiting it is as well. And then recruiters are also searching based off of referrals through networking events like this, LinkedIn, job boards, their internal hiring sites. And then these are a list of some of the top ones here. But the different types of recruiters. So I've mentioned a couple different times, there are two main different types. One that's an agency recruiter, and that's kind of what I was talking about before and what I more so am. So it's a recruiter that is working with a specific agency like a Brooksource, but they're working with multiple different clients. And then there's in-house recruiters that are more, say the people at Microsoft that would be recruiting for Microsoft employees. So to break them down a little bit more, um, agencies agency recruiters are working for staffing agencies that serve multiple clients, like I mentioned. They're hiring across all different industries. Sometimes they often hire short-term or project-based work. So kind of what I was talking about before, those contract or contract to hire roles. And they sometimes focus on hiring for specific roles or a wide variety of roles. And then one thing to note is a lot of these agency recruiters, most of the time they are working on commission. So it's just good to know kind of what they're compensated on. And then in-house recruiters, they are covering the internal hiring needs of a single company. They're hiring for a specific company's internal culture fit, industry fit, whatever that might be. They're often hiring permanent staff rather than short-term staff. They often have expertise in hiring for specific roles for their one specific client or the person that they work for specifically. And then typically they're also salary based, and sometimes they'll get, bonuses based on how many people they brought into the company that year or retention or something like that. So those are the two just main differences between the types of recruiters. Big thing I want to know is it's not good or bad to work with either. I would say the only thing to maybe not do is only focus on one. I think the biggest thing is knowing that both have their pros and both have their cons. And being able to work with both types of recruiters is going to give you a lot more opportunity, especially in the job market, where in-house recruiters have, obviously they are probably pros at working on specific types of business for specific companies, but agency recruiters have access to a lot more opportunities as well. So it really depends on what you're looking for there, but definitely recommend talking with both. And how you kind of know who you're reaching out to. Typically, a Brooksource recruiter, if I were to be reaching out to you, I would say, hey, I work for Brooksource. We're hiring for another company. So anyone that uses that verbiage is an agency recruiter, and anyone reaching out saying, hey, I have a role with Microsoft, and you see that they work at Microsoft, they're an in-house recruiter. And wanted to go over some of the basics of like how applying differs between the two. There's nothing, it's not extremely different, but agency does go a bit faster typically, and in-house does have a bit more of a longer process. So agency recruiters, they're either finding you by reaching out on LinkedIn, on job boards, or you're applying to their jobs that they posted on one of those job boards, or on their company's website. Typically, there's a 1 to 2 round interview process with them. It depends on what the client needs, if they need them to get a little bit more in depth. But then after that, the agency recruiter would submit the top candidate rather than a manager seeing the 500 people that applied to the role. Typically, it's like a 2-to-1 ratio. So if I have one position open, I'm only going to send the manager my top 2 people. And then typically it's only a 1 round interview with the end client at the end of that, and then an offer. Where on the in-house side, You submit your application to a career page. Your resume might be screened by an applicant tracking system, which is a question that we got in the Q&A, which we'll go over what that really looks like here in a minute. You'll have a phone interview, on-site and virtual interviews with the manager, and then an offer. So those are kind of the two main differences. Agency recruiters, if you're reached out to on LinkedIn or something, that's why it's a little bit more important to get back as soon as possible because they are working on a faster turnaround time, where in-house is moving a little bit slower and they're going through a lot of processes to make sure that they're finding a really perfect long-term fit for their team. So those are the main differences. While I'm just going over recruiter, is there anything that's coming through the chat? Any questions there? Okay. Anyone have any questions that they want to throw in the chat real quick? We will come back to those, but I just wanted to give a brief overview of what those different recruiter types look like. But the market right now. So as everyone knows, there have been a lot of layoffs here this year in the tech industry. I was honestly surprised by the number, 649% up and since 2022, which is more than 2020 and 2021 combined, which is a lot. Keeping in mind that a lot of the larger companies like the Amazons, Meta, Accenture, Google those are the ones that have been laying off. But when we're looking at that uptick in percentage, it's because they're such a large company. So don't let that number scare you too much. But a lot of the contributors to the reason this is happening is the economy, inflation, higher interest rates, over hiring, honestly, during COVID. There was a large boom. Everyone went into the tech industry. It became virtual, the world did. So a lot of people overhired at that point, and now they're kind of doing a pandemic job correction and doing a lot of these layoffs. So one thing just to note with the market, and I know I'm saying things that everyone probably already knows here, but with the market, large companies are making those cuts, but small and mid-sized companies are still hiring from the research that I've done. Like I mentioned, when it comes to the clients I'm working with, like Microsoft, Amazon, T-Mobile, all of those are in those larger company buckets. So that's just something to note there. But small to mid-sized companies are still hiring, and it's really important to continue to look for those in the job market. And when I was doing a little bit of research in design and in research and what's going to be coming up in 2023 and skill sets people are going to be looking for, some of the areas of expansion are getting into mobile, voice, virtual reality, things like that. Those are going to be skills that people are going to continue to look for in the UX space. So looking into those, doing a lot of personal development there, projects, I think that would be a really great way to be overcoming the market. But I understand it's a stressful place right now, but that's hopefully what the end of this presentation is going to be about, teaching a little bit more about LinkedIn, how to be standing out when there are these opportunities, and making sure you're coming up to the top of the searches when people are looking.
Hey, Jess, there's a question
Yeah.
that came up in the chat about whether whether multiple agencies are going to be posting on the same job.
Ooh, good question. So that is something that it depends on the role. Some companies are working with multiple agencies for one of their opportunities because they really need to get hired. They put it out to multiple different staffing companies, like multiple different Brooksources, basically. And so that's something that when you are working with a recruiter, if you're talking with other recruiters about the same role, being really transparent about that, because you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you've been submitted by two different recruiters. So yes, it can happen. I will say a lot of the roles that we've been working on more recently are more exclusive business. But that's something that you can always ask your recruiter too. Hey, is this an exclusive role? Are you the only one working with this client? And that's definitely a question that you can be asking your recruiter. And again, you'll know because you can ask what team and everything if you're being reached out to by multiple different agencies. Just make sure that you're being very clear that you're already talking with someone. And only going with one at the end of the day.
Okay,
Good
and then
question.
there's one other question about whether, what about augmented reality as a top skill that you're seeing trends for?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That is another one that should be added to that list, but continuing to build your skill set there. Awesome. Okay, and networking. I would say networking, especially right now, is a really important tool to be making sure that you're kind of getting ahead of the curve here. Networking is important for a ton of different reasons, but it's not only about, getting to know a person and building a relationship. It's also, you know, beyond just building a surface level relationship, a very building a genuine long-term relationship is really what can help you in your career, not only for future opportunities, but it can challenge you. It can make sure that you're growing in different ways. So you all being a part of things like Ladies at UX is so amazing for those reasons. So like I mentioned, it's an avenue to exchange ideas and challenge yourself. It gives you visibility into what's going on in the market. It also gives you visibility and kind of lets you share what you're doing as well, which could, you never know, get its way through the grapevine and get you into an opportunity. It's an avenue for new opportunities. It helps you reassess your qualifications, learning about, hey, this person's working on this cool new project that I didn't even know is something that's up and coming in the market. I should be working on that. Again, a ton of different benefits. One big one is a growth in self-confidence. The more that you're talking about the types of roles that you have and what you're working on and what you've been doing, it helps you, especially in these interviews. A big part of the UX experience is being able to storytell and share your story. So the more opportunity that you have to be able to do that in these networking environments can really help you in the interview process down the line. A fun little chart that shows how important networking really is. So the blue is people that apply to roles, red are people that networked, green is internal hiring, and then purple is an unnamed other. I don't know what's in that section, but basically when it comes to candidates that were unemployed but actively looking, and then employed active, employed tiptoeer kind of looking, and employed passive. Their next opportunity across the board you could see came from networking. I think a lot of people look at networking as okay, like everyone says to do it, but no one actually gets anywhere with it. It really is that important. So these numbers show kind of why networking is important there. But everyone says to network and no one tells you how to. So wanted to give like a little cheat sheet of how you could be messaging your network to make it a little bit easier on you. I know personally it is hard to reach out to someone that you've never talked to before. So here are some things that might help with it. One, having a purpose, not just reaching out randomly to someone that you don't really have any sort of reason to reach out to them. One, it's going to help you feel more comfortable reaching out to them and having a reason that they should reply to you. And two, like I mentioned, it gives them a reason to reply. Two, start with an introduction and a line of what you both have in common. So whether you're both a part of Ladies at UX, you went to the same school, you maybe live in the same city, something like that. Something that honestly, one of the bigger ones is someone could have a job that is your dream job and you want to reach out to them like, hey, obviously you don't have this in common with them now, but something I really want to do is get connected with you because you have the exact role I'm looking for, and it looks like we actually went to the same school. I'd love to grab you for a coffee to talk about how you got there and what you did. So start with an intro and a line of what you both have in common, state who you are, why you're reaching out in the first place, kind of going back to that purpose. Ask for a call for action. So whether it be take them out to coffee, whether it be just call them on the phone, maybe even invite them like, hey, I'm actually a part of this amazing networking group called Ladies at UX. Invite them to come to the next networking event with you so you can get to know and have a little bit more face time there. Make sure that it's not a novel. You're not telling them your entire life story in this LinkedIn message. People, especially depending on like how the higher up that you go in these LinkedIn messages and their tenure, people are pretty quick at like looking at their messages. And if it's a novel, they might not read it all and get back to you. So be semi-brief and concise. Don't be afraid to follow up. I'll go over LinkedIn and Recruiter and the different inboxes that recruiters have in a bit here. But sometimes if they're not responding to you, it's not because they're ignoring you. It's just that they really didn't see it. So following up can really make sure that their phone is being pinged of you're reaching out again. So don't be afraid to do that. And then you can also use the acronym FORWARD to remember for easy conversation starters. If you message your network and they get back to you and you have an actual in-person conversation, bring up family, occupation, recreation, and dreams. Those are things that people always want to talk about a lot. So this is just a quick little snippet on how to be reaching out and messaging your network. Wanted to include some examples of some good networking messages that I as a recruiter have received, and also some messages of some not so great ones that I've received as well. Some good networking message examples. So this is someone that had applied to an opportunity that I had posted on LinkedIn. They introduced themselves, what they're looking for, and then they included all the skills that make them a good fit for this opportunity, and then stated that they wanted to have another conversation and chat about the role. One thing that I maybe would add to this is like them asking a question, or again, like my biggest thing is if you're going to reach out because you had just applied for a role, explain why you're a good fit and what maybe makes you stand out. Even in bullet point format, that makes it a little bit easier for people to understand and see really quickly. I love when when someone messages me as a recruiter and says like, hey, I noticed that you're looking for this and this. I use this here, and I have 10 years of experience in this. 10 years of experience is over exaggerating. Again, I work with very associate level candidates, so that doesn't happen. But yeah, that's typically the type of message that gets me to notice as a recruiter, hey, this person put effort into this message. They definitely want to connect, and they weren't just telling me that they applied. They really want this opportunity, so I should get back to them. This example I put in here because they included their resume. That's something I definitely recommend doing, because again, it shows that you are really interested. You're not just like quickly pinging me like, hey, I just applied for your role. And they gave a little bit more information about what they're looking for and why they're a good fit. And then lastly, this is someone that reached out to me because they were introduced through another person. So they had mentioned like, it's their dream to work at the client that I had posted the role about. They got recommended by X person. This is where I hope we have a chance to speak. So again, all of these are kind of the length of what I was talking about, not too long, gave me enough information. But these were some good networking messages that I received. Obviously, you can do a lot beyond this. These are all related to applying for an opportunity, but those are typically the types of networking messages I receive as a recruiter. And some examples of ones I wouldn't do. For example, like the very first one in the top left, hi, there's no information here. I didn't get back to this person. It I would say it's not like a back and forth Teams conversation. It's very much you're messaging someone with a purpose. So make sure that you just include some more information. And then next to that, hey Jennifer, let's connect. Jennifer is actually the name of my mom and not me. So make sure just when you are sending a message, triple check their name, things like that. I did get back, but just make sure that you are uh, triple checking there. Another one, hi Jessica, hope you're doing well. Currently looking for UX roles. Do you have any? This one is something I get often, and it's not the worst thing in the world. I just put it here because there's not much effort put into the message. I think it just comes off a little bit better if you're messaging a recruiter with more information of like what types of roles you're looking for, giving a little bit more context as to why you're reaching out. So again, not the worst. You're not going to be turned away really a lot with this message, but putting a little bit more effort, I think, would go a longer way. And then same with this one. I applied to the position that you had posted on Brooksource. Hope to hear from you soon. Again, this is just, hey, I applied, letting me know that they did it. That's great, but why are you a good fit? Why should I reach out to you? Those are things that, again, not awful, but it could be improved. So any questions here or any other questions coming through the chat?
I have a comment, and
Yeah.
it's not a question.
Yeah.
It's just that I know how bad is someone, getting your name wrong. But I also know that right nowadays people are talking a lot about inclusivity, diversity. So I think that they contradict, because I am from another culture and it's
Yeah.
easy for me to not say someone's name right, or misspell or something. And honestly, if you want to be inclusive, getting the name wrong, I know it's a job application, blah blah blah, but I just would like that to be not so cruel. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I totally understand that. And yeah, I was not meaning to come across in that way. This was more just an example of paying attention to the details, especially when it's typed out and like a name is listed right above that, like pronunciations, things like that. Absolutely. And there's a ton of grace. Again, I still replied to this person. But this was more just, paying attention to the details and looking there.
Yeah, it wasn't just for you. It's just like I would like to start breaking the paradigm of name is you got my name wrong, because if we want to be inclusive, how, I don't know if you know, but a lot of people that move to this country, they have to change their name because people cannot tell their name.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And that's something as a recruiter, I'm working with multiple people, and I always, very first thing, hi, I say their name, and then I ask, am I pronouncing that correctly? Can you correct me? So definitely understand. Thanks for bringing that up.
No problem.
Just there was another question. Elena asks, I need a work visa. Do you know if companies, if after all these layoffs, are giving this visa? And do you see any trends there?
Yeah, really great question. I'm not quite sure on trends, but just to give an example, a lot of the, like in a staffing world, if you were to be working with a company like mine, when we're looking at opportunities, typically we're looking at like contract to hire. So my biggest concern, especially say you're on OPT or whatever that is, we can definitely cover your OPT or any of that during the duration of the contract. But the concern is then when you're brought on full time to one of these clients, we just want to make sure that they're able to bring you on full time at the end. So that's what I focus on, like when we're looking at opportunities, and that's what any contracting company, when they're looking at opportunities, should make sure that the end client can bring you on as well. To go to your original question, I'm not quite sure about trends, but clients that originally are able to, and when I say clients, companies that are originally able to bring you on and sponsor, I don't see that being taken away because of the layoffs and everything. So I can look into that. If you want to send me a personal message after this, I'll do a little bit more research and get back to you. That's my initial answer. Okay. Awesome. And then last thing, just different things that you could be doing at any stage. So this is anyone that is getting out of school. This is someone that is a career changer, coming back after a long gap, someone that has been working in the industry for a long time and is now looking for a new opportunity, or you're just interested. This is a list of things that you can be doing to network and make sure that you are getting out there, putting yourself out there in general, attending these events, and networking at any stage. So that said, I'm going to move on to LinkedIn. So going over some of the basics of LinkedIn, some of the things that you should be doing on your LinkedIn profile to stand out. And then at the end, we'll go over LinkedIn Recruiter. I'll share my screen and show from the background and behind the scenes what are recruiters looking at when they're on LinkedIn, and how we're finding you as a candidate and why it's so important to make sure that your LinkedIn profile is as built out or more built out than your resume. So to start, why is LinkedIn important? LinkedIn is used for a lot of different reasons. And when I'm talking about LinkedIn, this also does apply to most job boards. So I would recommend of all the job boards, make sure that you are on LinkedIn, because it is the most utilized job board for sure. But this also applies to Handshake, Indeed, Monster, all of those. So LinkedIn's important for applying to jobs, popping up in relevant searches, networking, kind of what it was originally made to do, and building your brand. So a few just stats, I won't go over all of them, but LinkedIn is really important for a ton of different reasons. Biggest one, 90% of recruiters are using LinkedIn regularly to find their next candidate. So when I say 90%, if I'm looking at Brooksource and most staffing companies, I would say 100% of them. But it really depends on, if they have a license for LinkedIn Recruiter, everything like that. But it is really important to make sure that you're on that job board and it's all updated as well. 49 million people are already on LinkedIn searching for jobs each week. So just making sure that you're able to update your LinkedIn, keep it as accurate as possible, so you can make sure that you are of the next stat, the 6 people hired every minute on LinkedIn. Again, I think these stats were from last year, so I don't know if they are completely correct in 2023, but there are a ton of different stats on why LinkedIn is so important. But starting kind of from the very beginning, starting basic with titles. So titles, so when I say title, it is kind of at the top of your profile where you have your name and then your descriptor. So this isn't like your title of your job. Some people do have that. I personally, on my LinkedIn, I think it does say program coordinator, but you could do something standard again with your title. UX designer, user researcher, product designer, design intern. You can make it education focused if you're still in school or you just got out of school, recent HCDE graduate, aspiring researcher, upcoming University of Washington graduate looking for an entry level job. But the reason I'm putting this in here is because you can get creative with it. That's something that I think a lot of people kind of shy away from, but you can do this to make yourself stand out. So design thinker and UX enthusiast, creating user-centered experiences that inspire, researcher by day, design innovator by night, uncovering user insights for impactful experiences. These are just some examples of different ones that you can do to, again, show your creativity, especially being in the UX space, whether it be research, design. That is something that people are looking for too. So bringing that into your profile and letting yourself kind of speak through it too. Like I mentioned, a lot of UX in general is about telling your story, which brings me into actually telling your story in the about section. Oh, and Lillian, was there a question? I saw you come off mute.
Yes, I had a question.
Yeah.
On that last slide, I was wondering if, as a recruiter, you are actually looking at keywords within the title section, if that is like a way that you're finding people. Not suggesting we should keyword stuff our our titles, but I'm wondering, is that something that plays a factor in being found?
Really great question. So the keyword searches will come from anywhere on your profile. So yes, it could be one of the things that pops up in a relevant search. So like, for example, if you had like user-centered, I clicked on that and it switched over, user-centered experiences, and maybe I, as the keyword search, was looking for user-centered design, might be something that comes up, but I wouldn't say I would focus on your title being what has you come up in a keyword search, but good question. Awesome. So telling your story in the about section. So kind of similar to a resume, the about section is kind of where you put your career objective, things like that. On a resume, the career objective is kind of some people say to have it, some people say not to. I personally, my rule of thumb, just on a resume tangent for a second, is if you're a career changer, you have a gap in your career history, or you're changing, I already said career changers, or anything like that that needs a little bit more explanation, definitely have that section there. But the about section in LinkedIn is a must, especially again for people in a more creative space. Using that to tell your story a little bit more, talk about who you are, how you got into this field, what you're involved in, who you're looking to chat with, the industry that you're interested in, and then also including a brief summary of some of the skills that you feel most passionate about. Those are things that I definitely recommend having in that about section, because it's fun as a recruiter to read through it and be able to pull on things for our conversations too, and it makes you a bit more relatable as a person as well. And then work experience, very similar to, say, a resume. So you're going to want to have a title that includes what your position was, make sure it is descriptive. So instead of being really generic, like for example, here it says intern, if you just put intern, I don't know what you did or what type of intern you were. So making sure that you have descriptive words there. The position details, it should not be blank, especially we'll talk about why keywords are so important here in a bit, but it should have 2 to 5 bullet points and include those keywords and talk about the impact that you made rather than the duties. So if I keep mentioning keywords and if that's a little bit confusing, I highlighted this example that shows kind of what I'd be looking for. So when recruiters run a search, they're putting in a Boolean string of X amount of words that they're looking for this person to have on their profile. And then the recruiter would see a view kind of like this, where if I put in end-to-end experience, report, data visualization, card sorting, things like that, excuse me, then this person would come up and it would show all the highlighted words, and I know that they're going to be a good fit. And we'll go over that here in a little bit more detail here in a second. Company, make sure you're using the drop-down option to include the company logo. So for example, this person could have just put Microsoft, but they clicked the official Microsoft company tag, which is important because recruiters can filter by that, and I'll show that in a bit. And then make sure you're just keeping dates up to date as well. Any questions coming through in the chat?
Yes, I missed one earlier. Sorry, Quinn. The question here was regarding a quote from a previous slide. It says 12 times more likely to be found on LinkedIn if you include at least 2 past working experiences. The question is this talking about any past working experience or specific to the job you're looking for?
Good question. I can't quote for the quote, but I would assume that they are looking at roles relevant to the job that you're looking for. That said, projects, personal projects that you've worked on, school projects, those all count. So we'll go over kind of where you could be putting those, but I definitely recommend even putting those in the work experience. And how I've seen people do it is for the company, they would put the school that they were at or personal project or whatever it might be. And then the title is the title of the project. And then in their bullets, they explain what they had done. If you have a link to it for them to look at on your portfolio, anything like that, including that. But that definitely counts. So definitely recommend doing that.
And then I have, let's see. Oh, I have another.
Oh.
Sorry. As I'm looking at the screen where it says UX designer Microsoft, I'm wondering if for scenarios where we are working with a staffing agency and we are working at Microsoft through Brooksource, how would you recommend we put this in LinkedIn, or is there a way that we definitely should not put this? We don't want to misrepresent that we're actually working for the company when we're contracting for them, or is that okay?
Great question.
What should we do there?
Yeah, great question. And I'm so sorry in the beginning there, I on accident muted you instead of myself.
No.
So I didn't mean to do that. But yes, how I recommend doing it, and this is something that when you're working with a recruiter, you might want to talk to them because other companies might have different preferences, but I definitely encourage, actually this person here that the screenshot is from was one of my contractors. And she worked at Microsoft, and I told her, honestly, she didn't do it, but it's okay. She's converted to full time, so it's okay. But there is a button right here that you could say it's a contract position, and it would show right here, kind of on the side. I don't know if you guys can see my pointer. Okay, it would just say contract. And that's totally fine. So it shows that she works at Microsoft. And then if you wanted to, I told her that she could put like at the very bottom, the bullet point or the very top one, like represented by Brooksource. But again, that's just a preference depending on the company that you're working with. The reason I recommend doing that is, again, I want this person to get the credit for working for Microsoft rather than for working for Brooksource, because that will help them in their future job searches. So that's my personal recommendation, is to put the company that you work for, but safe bet, you can always say represented by and then the other company.
Got it. And there's another question in the chat that I'm wondering, you might cover this in the next part here, but the question is, as a career changer from teacher to UX design, how do I make myself stand out on LinkedIn when the majority of my experience is in a classroom?
Really great question. And that kind of goes to what I was saying before. If you have any previous project experience, putting that in the experience section, that also goes for your resume. And then if you have any just personal upskilling that you've been doing, like posting that on LinkedIn, making that really known, but also making sure that's shown on your profile, you're adding that to your skills section. I think some of that will come up as we're going through this presentation, but it's also something that if you want to reach out to me afterwards to get some one-on-one advice on that, I'd be more than happy to do that. Awesome. And then education experience. So it does not need to be as built out as this person had done, but this is an example of someone that did build it out pretty well, and just wanted to show that, and also listed the courses. So really all you need to have is the name of the school, your degree, and the dates that you had worked, that you had been going to school there. But if you have any activities you're a part of, projects that you had done, skills that you learned while you're there, those are all things that obviously can help with this, the process, but it's not extremely necessary. So especially in the education section, I wouldn't say that this is a section that I mull over and am really, really invested in as a recruiter, but it can still help. Accomplishments and projects that you had worked on, making sure that you are listing those out, because those can be important. But again, in this project, this is from someone's project section. I also went and pulled from people kind of in the UW space. So if anyone here, if these are your projects, hi. But also wanted to just note that these projects can go in the project section, or they can go up again in your work experience as well.
We had a couple questions in here
Yeah.
about the dates. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You keep going to the next slide.
You're okay.
going back here, do we really need to have the dates on education? A comment here, I've been advised to not include the dates of graduation due to age discrimination.
Really great question. So those are when I'm recommending dates, typically I am talking to more associate level candidates, so keep that in mind. But for those reasons, if you don't want to include the dates on your LinkedIn, that's okay. Just note that a recruiter might ask, but I don't think it's a huge deal. That's more for, say, recent graduates. They know that you just graduated or you graduated in the last year. That can just help set expectations for the types of roles that you might be looking at. But again, if you're not super comfortable, don't. I'm not personally, I've never looked at a candidate's profile and said, oh, you don't have your dates, I'm not going to move forward. So that's okay. It really is important though for experience. That is a non-negotiable. Some of the experiences that you've done in your time as someone that's working, but education's not as big of a deal.
Okay, great. And we are getting some questions in the chat. Do you want to continue this or do you want to answer some of the questions first?
Let's take another question.
Okay, another question here. Thoughts about using descriptive job titles rather than internal titles? Is it okay as long as it accurately describes what you really did?
Absolutely, especially if you're looking for a new opportunity, changing the job title to be more mainstream of what people would be searching, if it is a really unique internal title, is definitely recommended.
Awesome, thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, and then any other questions we can go over in the Q&A section here too. Skills and endorsements, just making sure that you have those listed in your skill section. These are really good for the keywords as well, and those don't need to be skills that you've learned on the job. Those can also be skills that you've learned in personal projects. Opportunities, make sure you are listed as open to opportunities. Biggest thing here, I think I see a lot of people that are really hesitant about doing it because they are currently in an opportunity and they don't want to, alarm their current employer. LinkedIn has really great filters on where any recruiter or anyone that is in your current company will not be able to see that you are open to new opportunities. I know everyone sees the banners. You can choose to have that banner on. Just make sure when you're going through the options that you read it carefully and you select the one that makes sure that no one knows that you're open to opportunities except for recruiters that are not in your company. So keep that in mind. You should definitely be open. And then InMail, that's just what recruiters use to message you. There's 3 different ways that you can move forward with those. You can accept the message, allows the recruiter to start a conversation with you, decline the message, it shows the recruiter you're not interested, or ignore the message. Only thing to note here is you are kind of being filtered by how often you are responding. So if you ignore messages often, doesn't mean you're doomed, don't worry. But there is like a little filter that recruiters can select of more likely to respond if they're going really quickly on a role. So if you accept or decline the messages, you're still going to come up in that more likely to respond. But if you'd ignored almost every recruiter message you've ever gotten, you might not show up there. So just keeping that in mind. And again, agency recruiting, the turnaround is really quick. So if you do get an agency recruiter message and you respond in about 2-3 days, just know that the role might be gone by then. So just keep that in mind and make sure you have your notifications on. And I mentioned a couple different times what LinkedIn Recruiter is. I think just due to time, I'm going to pull up my screen and show LinkedIn Recruiter in live time here. So just bear with me one moment. But LinkedIn Recruiter is basically recruiter's version of what you all see as LinkedIn. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. Oop. But basically through LinkedIn Recruiter, I can do searches, look at past applicants, things like that. A couple things that I like to share and show is when it comes to opportunities that I've had in the past. This isn't a design role, but I think it's a really good example of how recruiting actually works. So for this role, I had around 700 people apply. 695 people applied to this role. It was a software development role, and I was looking for someone that had, and the manager said that they had to have C#, .NET, and some sort of cloud, or Azure, or GCP, or AWS. So this is me putting in my Boolean string with some of the keywords that this person has to have somewhere on their LinkedIn profile. And that's going to make it from nearly 700 people to 108 people. Why this is important is these are people that have applied to this opportunity, and it's purely going off of your LinkedIn profile. It's not going off of the resume that you had posted on your LinkedIn. So that's why it's really important to make sure that your LinkedIn profile is as updated as possible. And a lot of the keywords that recruiters would be searching for opportunities, and make sure those are on your LinkedIn profile, and how to kind of know what those keywords might be when you're looking at the job postings and things, the skills that they say are must-have skills. Make sure that the ones that you're seeing on there are reflective of skills that you have on your profile. You're not using a lot of acronyms. If you are, you're spelling them out as well next to it, things like that. But this is just to show how quickly it can be filtered out. There are 600 people that probably had the skills, but they're not going to be able to come up in my search because of the keyword search function on LinkedIn. But as you can see here, there are a lot of different filters that recruiters can take. They can go by the current location, a company they had worked at, which is what I was talking about with the drop-down menu before, different skills, schools that they had worked at, industries they've worked in, job titles that they have. But this is, again, just for the application. So there's a lot of other filters that recruiters can make when they're just searching as well, for a candidate, rather than just going through applicants. And again, you can also filter by open to work. For example, let's see, I think I need to find someone that says that they're open to work right now. This is a really old job posting. But I don't know if it'll show, but
Hey, Jess, are the
Yeah.
keywords anywhere on LinkedIn, or is it just limited to the work experience areas?
Great question. So it's anywhere on LinkedIn, and it's not doing it right now. LinkedIn's been kind of glitching lately, but typically, so say like one of my keywords were candidates, it would show up like this. It would be highlighted on the page for a recruiter as they're scrolling through, and it's anywhere. It could be in your in your title, it could be in your explanation, your education section, your skills section. It can really be anywhere. So just making sure that the keywords are somewhere on your profile, and the more often you have them, the more beneficial it is as well. Awesome. So that's LinkedIn Recruiter, and that's why those keywords are really important to make sure that you're having. Again, if they want like a personalized one-on-one time to go over some of this, more than happy to go over that, just to show a little bit more detail from the slides that I had as well. Some keywords where they count. Title, summary, experience section, education, skills, projects, and again, not on the resume, which is something that a lot of people just assume recruiters are going off your resume when you are applying on LinkedIn, and that's not really the case. So just making sure that you are prioritizing putting those in. And then this is what some of the filters look like on the side for recruiters when they're doing a traditional search as well.